Well, why does a company want to use an independent contractor? Well, frankly, there's a lot of flexibility to having an independent contractor that you don't really have with an employee. I mean, you can have them, as far as you're concerned, have them come and go pretty much at will. Maybe they'll work for you for 3 weeks now. Maybe they'll work for you for 3 weeks in another 2 months. There's more flexibility, perhaps. There's certainly that cost savings. Sometimes it's the preference of the worker. The worker themselves says, no, I don't want to be an employee. I want to be able to call my own shots. I don't want to have continue myself working for you. I'd rather not have the taxes taken out of my paycheck. I'd rather get a 1099 at the end of the year. I'd rather operate that way. Some business models are really geared around using an independent contractor, and the construction industry is one of those. Geared around the whole construction industry basically rotates on the independent contractor model. It does reduce your union risk. Your independent contractors, if they're properly classified as an independent contractor, are not your regular employees. They cannot be part of a union organizing drive. So that's another reason why some companies prefer to classify their workers as independent contractors. You don't have to deal with any immigration issues. You don't have to have to fill out I-9s for these people. If they're an independent contractor, it's up to them to show that they're able to work. It's not your problem. And it does limit your EEO liability. You don't have to worry about the charge of discrimination brought by an independent contractor if they're not an employee. Now, I will tell you that the cases that have begun to come down have said, well, you know what? This person isn't really an independent contractor. And therefore, even though you didn't think you had to worry about your discrimination policies with regard to this individual, you did. And in fact, you violated them. And in fact, you're liable. So there's a whole area there where you're exposing yourself to some risk if these people aren't properly classified. There's also cost savings. Presumably, your independent contractors are already trained for the job, right? I mean, they come to you fully trained, ready to work. There are some estimates that say that it costs you 20 to 30% less per worker to have an independent contractor than it would if you had that person as an employee. We've already talked about the fact that you not only save on FICA FUTA, but you also save on your state unemployment fund contributions, your workers' compensation premiums, benefits, huge savings. Again, that's what sort of puts you, if you're using independent contractors improperly, and your competition is forced to use is forced to consider those people as workers, you have an unfair advantage, at least as far as the government is concerned. Now, your risks are pretty big. The IRS or some other governmental agency might challenge your conclusion and might come to the conclusion that the worker is actually an employee. And that would not only then apply to that individual worker, but it would also apply to all other workers similarly situated to that worker. So it's not going to just affect him, it's going to affect everybody else in his job category. So to the extent that you have a whole bunch of people in a particular type of work who are all misclassified, that multiplies your risks. As far as penalties, income tax liabilities, requirement that you pay FICA and FUTA contributions that you had otherwise should have owed, overtime pay or other wage liability to the worker. If you're considering them an independent contractor and you haven't been keeping track of their hours of work and you've been paying them a flat fee or maybe an hourly wage, maybe they are entitled to time and a half for the hours that they worked over 40. Oops. You know that you can go back 2 years, and if it's willful, 3 years for those overtime benefits. And frankly, it's up to you to show that the employee did not work that overtime. And if you've really been dealing with this person as an independent contractor, you haven't been keeping track of the hours that they work. You have no way of proving that they didn't work all day Saturday and all day Sunday on your job. And 2 or 3 years later, they can come back and say, oh, yes, I did, and I was an employee, and you knew that, and you misclassified me, and therefore you owe me, and it's double and treble damages. So it can mount up very, very quickly. Unemployment insurance payments, you might have to pay those back. Workers' comp insurance payments, you might have to pay those back. Workers' comp benefits to the individual who was injured on the job. Independent contractor, no, you don't owe that sort of a benefit to, but if they really should have been treated as an employee and they were injured, you should have had workers' comp benefits going to that person. There might be other civil or criminal liability, and certainly benefits issues. If this person really should have been covered under your health insurance plan and instead had to pay out of pocket for health insurance, and it was your fault that they weren't covered under your health insurance plan, could your company perhaps be liable to that individual for the cost of their medical benefits?